you have something due at work and you're going to give more attention there. 1 minute you have a crisis at home and you're going to give more attention there. So I don't really call it work-life balance. I call it work-life integration. And we start and get that concept through, and then we start applying it. And we see where we can improve upon it, because it's really very easy. The biggest factor people come up with is time. And so time management obviously is something that needs to be addressed as well, because it's really not one thing over another. Everything is integrated.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, here's another one. Trust and respect, which in an institution like medical institutions, there is very often, if not the reality, at least the perception of a hierarchy with the different people who have played different roles there. So how about trust and respect?
Well, trust and respect is really interesting. The way you can develop trust the fastest is to allow yourself to be vulnerable and model that. Because until you know that it's okay to show your imperfections and your errors and make mistakes, you're going to feel like you're always going to be judged and criticized, and you're not going to be willing to do that. And it's hard to collaborate in the face of lack of trust. So teams don't work very well. Families don't work very well unless we know we have each other's back. And in order to do that, we really need to communicate better and more compassionately and ask questions of each other rather than assume we know what the answer is and therefore be disappointed when our expectations are not met.
Interesting. Okay, super. One more would be difficult conversations, because obviously, again, in a medical situation, there's all kinds of different difficult conversations, including with patients and their families, and then between staff members, and so on and so forth. So how does toxic communication show up there, and how might you remedy that or move it forward?
Difficult conversations are interesting because people like to, again, blame the person they're talking to, and they're not going to listen. They're not going to be willing to hear it. And to a certain degree, that's true. Your information can fall on deaf ears, and you may have to repeat it, because communication has to happen consistently and often. And yet, what I've discovered is that it's how we communicate with these people, whether they start to get on board and whether they're difficult or not. So when we talk to them from our heart with compassion and tell them what they are good at and what we appreciate about them, and yet this is what we cannot accept, with honesty and transparency, but you also add in what you're willing to help them with, or what you absolutely, they've crossed the boundary. They need to know the boundaries and what they are, and have clarity of where the direction is and what is expected of them. And when you do this, you very often get positive results.
Okay, super. And do you find that, with things like this, I mean, we expect people to show up in a work environment and be productive and be at their best, and like you just said, being honest and open and so on. But a lot of times people aren't that way in their own lives anyway, at home or anywhere else. So do you often find there's some kind of pushback or resistance, either because they simply don't have it in them yet, they don't know how, or is it more a matter of awareness, or is it more a matter of the blame game where they say, well, I'm not going to be the first one to start, and so on?
Well,
or all of that?
A combination of all of the above, of course. What I try to do is flip their perspective and just say, well, let me play devil's advocate and show them what the other person just might be thinking. And very often they rebel, and very often we go through the same dialogue more than once. And I had clients that will say, like 3 sessions later, oh my God, I just realized what you were saying to me. And now they get it, and they realize, but what do I do about it? And they realize that the change has to take place not just at work, but also at home, and again, and with their friends and socially. And again, that's part of this work-life balance and integration, because we can't turn ourselves off and turn ourselves on. It just doesn't work that way. And when families are feeling like you're just working, it's partly because you're not communicating to them the pressures you're under and how you're feeling. People need to know how the emotional and spiritual end of it is, not just what do you need to get done.
Fantastic. Well, that's the humanity being brought back in again, and that's so crucial. Well, speaking of that, you are also a special needs advocate. And I know in conversations we've had in the past, you say you've been taught as much by your son, who has special needs, as you mentioned in your bio, as much as you've ever given or taught to him.
Well, yes, and it's interesting. It's people see and hear what they choose to see and hear. We're all at choice, and we're all empowered to do more than we do. We just choose to remain stuck or not. And most people will look at my son, who does not read and write, and he does not have the same engaged and meaningful conversation at the same level that you and I, for instance, are having right now. And yet, he can teach so much if you choose to see it. So he has an uncanny ability to recognize when someone is treating him from the heart, or whether they're just treating him because they don't care. And they're just kind of pushing him to kind of fit into their schedule. And he rebels against it. And it's really obvious. And I've had people along his way growing up telling me it's hormonal, or it's this, or it's that, or he's wetting his bed. And I'm saying, no, he wet the bed because it was the only way you were going to call me when I was abroad. And he did it. He figured it out because he knew that. And then I say, so which care provider is not treating him compassionately? And they're stunned, but every single time, bar none, we've been able to unearth where the problem was. And it was never about my son. It was about how other people were treating him. And so he can teach you to appreciate what you have and to have gratitude, because without that, life just really isn't worth living. We don't have a real purpose and direction. We don't appreciate what we have, and we're always climbing for higher success and more achievements, and we're never going to be satisfied.
Yeah, beautiful. And obviously, I know you're an advocate. You've pushed legislation and so on and so forth. Has this new push, more recent push for diversity and inclusion, shown up on your radar, or is this something that's been a part of your life, both as a mom and as a professional, basically your whole adult life of affecting special needs as clients and patients and so on in the medical arena or in society at large?
I think that it's always been going on. I see disability as just a branch of vulnerable populations, and that's the one that I choose to focus on at the moment. But even when you look at the racial discrepancies that are being brought to light nowadays, and that's not just happening in our country, but support from all over, because there are people that are persecuted and treated poorly, unfairly, unjustly all over the world. And it didn't just happen today. We've been doing it for years and years. And I think you may have even told me this once, that you were talking to an individual who was Black, and he didn't get the same pay maybe as somebody else, and he maybe had some of these mistreatments, and yet he recognized that he did have the advantage of being male versus female. And he said he wouldn't trade that for anything in the world, because we all have our privileges, and some more than others, no question about it. And yet what we need to do is be able to look in the mirror and be truthful with ourselves and our own biases, because we all have them. And it's not that we're wrong. It's how can we improve upon ourselves and improve upon the lives of everyone around us. So when I advocate for my son or someone with disability, I try to always look at more than one way, ask people for their input, brainstorm with them, and create something even better than the first 3 suggestions that I give. And I try to do it so that we change a policy and a system, and it's something that doesn't just apply to one person, but to many people. Because without that, we haven't really made much of a dent.
Well, that's true. So, Karen, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
The best way is through either my website or my email, which would be Rigamonte, Rigamonti, with no dots in there, at gmail.com.
Okay, so drkaren.org, that's drkaren, Karen.org, or a K for your first name, Karen, Rigamonte, Rigamonti, at gmail. Super. So just to finish off that, the last minute or so that we've got, talk to a person-centered care, because that's at the crux of everything you do in terms of bringing humanity, not only the health institutions, but everybody's life in general.
Well, what I feel is that everyone needs to have life and work and healthcare customized for them. And everyone's voice needs to be at the table. No one voice should be overshadowed by somebody else. When we want collaboration and we want to get people who are committed to following, we need to hear every voice, every input, and know that they were heard, and then the best decision was made for the well-being of the entire organization or community, and not just obviously one person. But without that ability to hear all the voices and to really recognize the needs, desires, wants, and dreams of everyone, we aren't treating people fairly, and we are not improving upon the situation. And we won't get the real commitment that we need for a better life tomorrow.
Well, and what's popping up for me is that, yes, every voice needs to be heard, and the other side of that is people need to be listening. And so, we need to go back and forth between speaking and listening to be heard, but also to hear others. And I think, I'm sure you would agree that in the society we live in now, there's a lot of voicing without listening. And so people actually aren't heard even though things are being voiced. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. But I think it's, when I do workshops and interactive events with communication or compassion, we go also into what's listening. And it's not just hearing words or seeing words or whatever, it's understanding them, and understanding them not but from my own perspective and my own experiences, but from the perspective and experiences of the person that's saying them. And it's not just the actual words, but what's behind the words. What do they really mean and intend for me to understand and acknowledge? And I have to feel that pain or that joy. And when I do, then I can give my side of the story and do it with an open heart and an open mind so that we can collaborate and negotiate and come out with the best response for both of us and for everyone else around us.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. So we can all hope as much and do our part as you are in such a grand way at making that kind of world a place that we can live in every day. So thank you so much, Dr. Karen Rigamonte, for being here with us today on Living Legacy Leadership.
Thank you, Donna. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thanks to our listeners as well. We invite you to tune into the SOBradionetwork.com and catch our other shows that are in archives, all kinds of interesting people with interesting and different perspectives, and also GameChangerThinking.com, where you can find resources and links to some of the things I have going on beyond this particular platform here. So just a little reminder that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Thank you. Bye-bye now.